From the moment I met Serafina Locke, I was captivated by how easily she understood the world, as if we spoke the same invisible language woven from silence and subtle glances. Our conversations touched on everything from art to ambition, and our laughter seemed to echo the promise of an unbreakable bond. At first, this connection seemed like a rare discovery, a happy coincidence of two souls destined to walk through life side by side. I was convinced that trust would be the foundation of our relationship, unshakable by time or circumstance. We carefully built our life like experienced architects, drawing plans on the finest parchment. Serafina's warmth and charm enlivened every room, and her sharp mind complemented mine in both business and dreams. Lysander Gray was nothing more than a passing mention to us, a name barely etched in our shared history. Marceline Voss, my resourceful assistant, made sure my days were organized, but no one interfered with the fragile cocoon Serafina and I had created. Everything seemed perfect, as if the world itself had conspired to paint our union with perfect strokes. But beneath the surface of smiles and sparkling evenings, subtle inconsistencies began to prick my consciousness like hidden thorns. It started with small details, an unfamiliar but lingering scent on Serafina's scarf, a hurried glance when I asked her about her day, or the hesitation that flashed in her eyes when I mentioned Lysander. These moments were fleeting but persistent, fragments of silence that spoke louder than her words. I found myself replaying conversations in my mind, searching for cracks in the story we had so lovingly pieced together. I remember one day when sunlight streamed through the study window, and I was overcome by a faint uneasiness when Serafina slipped away to answer the phone, whispering something hurriedly and looking back over her shoulder. The intimacy of those whispered tones contrasted sharply with her usual openness. I tried to reconcile the woman I adored with the shadow of secrecy that was taking root in her. The paradox of our closeness and this inexplicable distance deeply disturbed me, sowing the first seeds of doubt in my mind. Memories of our early days flooded back, highlighting how easy everything had seemed, how each step had been perfectly calculated. In our conversations about the future, we had shared a vision of trust and loyalty, but now those words seemed fragile and uncertain. Indecision and caution were unfamiliar to me. I wondered, maybe I had misread the signs, or had Serafina changed so much that I hadn't noticed? Questions tormented me, demanding answers I didn't want or wasn't ready to give. One evening, shortly after I returned from a meeting, Marceline walked into my office with an unexpectedly troubled expression on her face. Without hesitation, she asked the question that had been weighing on her mind for a long time. "Do you really think everything between you and Serafina is as it seems?" Her candor stunned me for a moment. For the first time, someone had acknowledged the inconsistencies I had been silently struggling with. Marceline wasn't just my assistant. She was my confidant, who understood what I couldn't put into words. The days that followed were spent in quiet tension. I noticed that Serafina's phone screen would suddenly dim when I entered the room, and she began to hide even the smallest gestures, text messages, calls, quickly closing apps. These changes were so minor that they could have been dismissed as coincidental, but trusting my intuition seemed just as important. The fabric of my confidence was unraveling thread by thread, revealing a pattern I feared but couldn't fully understand. Our relationship, once a refuge, began to feel like a puzzle with missing pieces. Evenings that had once been filled with tenderness were now filled with tension lurking beneath the surface. I began to analyze Serafina's behavior from different angles, searching for explanations that made sense and didn't destroy the hope I was clinging to. She was the woman I had decided to share my life with, but something irreparable was growing between us, like a quiet storm gathering strength. Rowena Hale, Lysander's wife, became a ghostly figure on the periphery of my thoughts. I barely knew her personally, but her name had an inexplicable meaning for me. Their connection was a dry knot in the fabric of our social circle, a barely audible whisper of other lives intertwined with ours. I convinced myself that it was nothing more than a coincidence, that trust was not a fragile thread that could be easily broken by distant rumors. Nevertheless, the nagging feeling lingered like an unwelcome guest, turning suspicion into quiet fear. Late at night, when silence reigned in the mansion and the shadows lengthened, doubts echoed louder and louder in my head. I replayed our shared promises, laughter, and casual conversations over and over again in my mind, comparing them to the strange silence and evasiveness. I wondered if there was enough love to bridge the growing gap, or if what I thought was loyalty was just an illusion I had chosen to believe in. Uncertainty tore away the masks, exposing me to a harsh pain I couldn't yet fully understand. The fragile trust we had woven began to resemble a tapestry unraveling at the edges. I realized that understanding the whole truth would require courage beyond simple acceptance. It would call into question the very foundations on which I thought my life, my marriage, and myself were built. Serafina's actions hinted at a hidden world behind the smiling face I knew, and I stood at the threshold, unsure whether to step forward or retreat into denial. Marceline remained my loyal ally, her calmness a balm for my growing confusion. She listened without judgment, clarifying my thoughts when they became entangled in paranoia and fear. Celeste Arden, her close friend, offered a perspective based on empathy and strength, reminding me that I was not alone in facing the storms threatening my world. With each conversation, I felt the disbelief gradually give way to determination, a growing willingness to face whatever truth awaited me. My early perception of us as invincible partners gradually faded, giving way to a complex reality full of secrets and betrayals hinted at by half-spoken words and furtive actions. The facade of perfection was cracking, and I realized that love alone does not guarantee trust and fidelity. The question that haunted me became increasingly urgent. Who was the woman I had married, and who was the woman standing before me now? The answer hung over us like a shadow, defining every thought and action in the days that followed. As my doubts deepened, an unexpected discovery came not from confrontation, but from observation. I found a small, unfamiliar package of pills hidden in a bathroom cabinet. They were birth control pills, which Serafina had no reason to use given my vasectomy and our agreement. This discovery struck me with a quiet but profound shock, pointing to gaps in our shared history that I could no longer ignore. It was the first tangible sign that the perfect image of our marriage was a carefully crafted illusion. The foundation cracked even further when I pieced together all the clues. The hidden phone, the secret messages. Lysander Gray's closeness seemed to permeate the places I considered exclusively ours with Serafina. The betrayal wasn't just a breach of trust, but a rupture in the very story that defined us. The nature of that rupture was complex, multifaceted, and painfully clear. What we had wasn't the faithful partnership I believed it to be. This new reality forced me to take on a new role, that of a reluctant detective grappling with evidence that threatened to destroy everything I had built, not only in my personal life, but also in the business world, where my partner Dorian Blythe and I had a stake. The lines between loyalty and betrayal were blurred, and with each new piece of evidence, the space for forgiveness grew smaller. I found myself mentally preparing for a battle that extended far beyond the walls of our home. By confiding in Marceline, I found unexpected strength. Her pragmatic approach and unwavering support helped me gather my thoughts and plan my next steps without giving in to my emotions. Soon, Edric Fenwick, my lawyer and trusted advisor, stepped in and helped me see reality amid the emotional storm raging around me. This alliance gave me hope that the storm would subside, and I would be able to regain control of the life that was slipping through my fingers. The tension between Serafina and me grew quietly but palpably, like the hidden breath before an explosion. Moments of warmth were now tinged with suspicion, and smiles often hid deeper emotions. Every day tested the limits of denial and the courage to face the painful truth. It was clear that our story was no longer simple and safe, but had turned into a complex web of love, deception, and the search for justice. As I prepare to face these unfolding realities, I carry with me memories of how it all began, of the hope, trust, and dreams that seemed so unshakable. This past is both a burden and a motivation for me. Ahead of me lie revelations and reckoning, but also the possibility of liberation and a new beginning. Now I stand at this crossroads, armed with truth and determination, ready for whatever twists and turns may come. When I found a strange foil packet of pills in the bathroom, I felt a chill run through me. It didn't look like anything I recognized, certainly not something Serafina would take. I remembered our past, how trust once defined every moment we shared. We met at a late autumn ball, her laughter weaving itself into my loneliness like a delicate thread. Our relationship developed slowly, each smile building a fragile foundation. We became one, or so I thought. But now that foundation seemed like fragile glass ready to shatter under the weight of suspicion. I couldn't shake the feeling that Serafina was hiding something. My world soon became filled with doubt as hints of a secret slipped through casual remarks and furtive glances. I began my investigation cautiously, hoping to find a rational explanation. I installed cameras in inconspicuous corners of our home and discovered a locked box containing a second phone. This device was a revelation. It pulsed with hidden conversations and encrypted messages. The name Lysander Gray appeared again and again, casting a sinister shadow over my bewildered mind. Seraphina's deception went far beyond infidelity. It was the systematic destruction of my place in our lives. She had entrusted Lysander with her secrets, granting him access to our sanctuary while I remained in the dark. This affair was not merely physical, it was a violation of the most sacred trust, a theft of my identity as a husband and father. My hands trembled as I scrolled through countless messages, affectionate words, plans whispered in the dead of night, and jokes from which I was completely excluded. Each new discovery was a fresh wound. Marcelina Voss, my loyal assistant, noticed without a word that I was losing my composure. One afternoon, as I sat staring at the empty spot at the dinner table, she quietly placed her hand on mine. For the first time, I confided in someone. I told her about the pill foil, the hidden phone, and the relentless fear that had destroyed all my hopes. Marceline did not judge me or offer empty words. Instead, her presence became an anchor for me in a stormy sea. Determined to reveal the whole truth about Seraphina's betrayal, I collected DNA samples from my children under the guise of a routine medical examination. The alienation I had cultivated crumbled, with every swab collected and vial hidden. The nightmare lurking beneath the surface began to take on a terrifying clarity. Genetic testing was a cruel lottery I dared not think about fully, but the results pierced me like a dagger. None of the children were mine. This discovery was an earthquake that shattered the last remnants of my faith. The shock was compounded when I learned about the vasectomy that Seraphina had convinced me to undergo, masking her duplicity under the guise of mutual consent. It was a calculated betrayal, a trap from which I could no longer escape. I felt devastated, stripped not only of my family but of any chance of ever having a child of my own. Lysander Gray, the man who had been hiding within our walls and shadows, was their biological father. The children called him Dad, in whispered memories I was never a part of. This knowledge carved a deep void in my soul, filled with rage and grief. Edric Fenwick, my trusted lawyer, brought clarity to the chaos. He confirmed the existence of a prenuptial agreement that protected me from financial ruin, but explained that the emotional consequences were not so easy to contain. He offered several courses of action. Ignore the betrayal or seek justice with all my might. I was adamant. Simply remaining silent would be a betrayal of myself. Marcelina and I began to develop a strategy, balancing secrecy and confrontation to preserve my business and my dignity amid the legal storm that threatened to engulf us. I sold my company's shares to an offshore trust, a move designed both to preserve and protect. Although I lost income, I retained control, ensuring that Seraphina could not seize the assets during the impending divorce. Discussions with Dorian Blythe, my longtime business partner, were tense, but he supported me. He sympathized with my situation and agreed to remain on my side. Marceline's unwavering loyalty strengthened my resolve. She became my shield and confidant in this battlefield of hearts and law. At a desperate moment, Marceline invited me to her home, offering refuge and warmth. She arranged for a doctor to consult with me, who informed me that the vasectomy could be reversed, a ray of hope amid despair. The possibility of becoming a father reignited the spark of life within me. However, hope was intertwined with bitter determination. Together, we faced a tangled web of deceit. Rowena Hale, Lysander's unsuspecting wife, and the complex lies that bound us all together. Rowan's admission of her suspicions and her determination to act crystallized our shared pain. Seraphina had not only destroyed my life but also shattered the families around her. We silently understood that this betrayal demanded a response that went beyond a broken heart. The next steps had to be strategic and precise, aimed at debunking the false narrative woven by Seraphina. Our alliance, born out of shared suffering, became the first true act of resistance. Seraphina's duplicity was exposed not by sensational videos or dramatic confessions, but by intercepted emails and carefully collected fragments of conversations. The exposure was methodical, stripping her of her mask of innocence and her right to everything. On the day the evidence was handed over to her entourage, her friends, family, and business community, I maintained my composure. Serafina's attempts at reconciliation were met with a cold rejection. I demanded that she communicate only through Edric, severing all personal ties. The consequences were immediate and devastating to her reputation, but for me, it was liberating. The betrayal that had once threatened to consume me became a catalyst for rebirth. Marceline's return to professionalism reminded me of the emotional walls I had begun to tear down. Beneath the pain, a cautious hope awakened, a chance at redemption and a new beginning after this chapter of loss. Returning to my familiar routine, I felt the weight of loneliness and strength intertwine. The shadows of the past still lingered, but they no longer dictated where I would go. With Marceline's support and Edric's advice, I prepared to face new challenges with renewed strength. The storm subsided, revealing a sky full of possibilities and faint hopes for healing. The steps forward were uncertain, but for the first time in months, I accepted the path ahead. The dull hum of the air conditioner in the office barely drowned out the noise of the city outside the window. I sat by the window watching the midday crowd, but my thoughts were far away. Serafina had seemed more distant than usual in recent weeks, but I convinced myself it was just work stress. We had been together for 10 years and had built a life that I thought was unshakable. Our relationship wasn't always perfect, but the foundation seemed solid. We met at a gallery opening. Her laughter was as bright as the canvases, and our connection grew stronger over quiet dinners and whispered dreams. Her warmth was a refuge in the chaos of my world. Before everything turned cold, we were partners not only in life but also in business. Serafina was often my confidant and advisor. Lysander was a name I knew only from passing references to her vague business meetings. She was a figure present on the periphery but never a threat. I trusted her unconditionally, unaware of the hidden layers beneath the surface. Slow, subtle changes, extra phone calls at odd hours, sudden trips, were easily explained away. We talked about our future, the children we were raising, the company we were building. These pillars seemed unshakable until one moment shattered everything. The revelation came by accident, not as a result of careful observation or the discovery of secret messages. One afternoon, I met up with Celeste Arden for coffee and to find solace in the company of one of Marceline's close friends. Our conversation unexpectedly turned to Serafina. Celeste's tone changed, and there was more than just concern in her hesitation. She started talking about Lysandra, mentioning details that didn't fit the harmless picture I had painted for myself. The descriptions, the frequency of their meetings, it all painted a familiar but deeply painful picture. My heart skipped a beat as I pieced together the comments to form a silent confession that none of us dared to say out loud. On that day, the harsh truth hit me like a bolt of lightning. Serafina had been seeing Lysander for years, not just casually, but deeply, immersed in a secret life. I was not given any videos or compromising text messages. Instead, a casual conversation, someone else's carelessly dropped words, lifted the veil. The betrayal was sharp and immediate, all the more cruel because it came without warning or confrontation. A quiet heaviness descended upon me, making the air around me thick and cold. Shaken, I turned to Marceline, my most trusted assistant. Her calmness reassured me as I recounted the explosion that had occurred in my life. Marceline listened without interruption, her perceptive eyes reflecting shock and sympathy. She showed a composed calm, reminding me that our strength lay in strategy, not despair. Together, we began to chart a path forward, cautious, precise steps to protect what was mine. This betrayal could not be met with silence, only with careful, deliberate action. Preparing for confrontation meant revisiting every detail of our life together. I double-checked the company's documents with Dorian Blythe, my loyal partner, whose quiet support became an unexpected source of strength. We found protective provisions and developed a line of defense, turning every discovery into a tool rather than a weakness. Marcelina coordinated discreet investigations, gathering information about Lysandra and uncovering layer after layer of deception. The realization that Serafina had manipulated our world with such ease awakened a determination in me that I never knew I had. Adric Fenwick, a formidable and uncompromising man, became my legal shield. Over the course of a series of meetings, he laid out options that ranged from reluctant agreement to complete legal destruction. The last option, devastating but restorative, appealed to me for its emotional justice, not mere revenge. I didn't want Serafina to simply disappear. I wanted the truth to come out and the consequences to extend beyond personal misfortune. Edric's methodical approach armed me for war, not with bullets, but with the law and facts. However, alongside legal measures, I sought emotional release in unexpected ways. Marceline introduced me not only to strategy, her compassion helped me confront my pain without drowning in it. We spent evenings discussing a future defined not by betrayal but by resilience. She arranged meetings with therapists and doctors when I learned that my chance of becoming a biological father had been virtually eliminated by a vasectomy she had never told me about. This news was a new wound, but the realization that the situation could change, albeit uncertainly, gave rise to a fragile but real hope. An extraordinary moment came when we arranged a meeting with Rowena Hale, Lysander's wife, a woman I never thought I would talk to. Her acknowledgement of her suspicions, mixed with regret, created an unexpected bond of broken trust. We shared our truths without malice, connected by a common thread of betrayal. This meeting shattered the illusion of isolated pain. It was a complex web of human weakness, and understanding this brought unexpected peace. Royana's determination to move forward with dignity reflected a stoic acceptance that I aspired to emulate. In the quiet hours after all the revelations and plans, I realized the depth of the changes taking place within me. Serafina's absence, both physical and emotional, strangely lightened the heavy atmosphere of my daily life. Marceline's reserved professionalism began to give way to warmth, subtle gestures hinting at something more complex brewing beneath our shared difficulties. It was a delicate dance that I didn't dare name aloud, but the possibility of a new beginning stirred my cautious heart. Perhaps from these ruins a new foundation could emerge, built on clarity and trust, however slow and uncertain the path might be. Each day ended with a mixture of sadness and relief. The company remained my responsibility, and every decision was a defense against the shadows of the past. But with each step forward, I felt pieces of myself returning to the present. The wounds inflicted would not disappear quickly, but their pain strengthened my resolve to rebuild everything. This chapter, steeped in betrayal and exposure, was coming to a close, making room for liberation and hope, even if they were born from the ashes of what once was. I knew that the road ahead would require strength that I had not yet fully discovered. Practical issues intertwined with emotional turmoil, and the threads of my broken life gradually wove themselves into a new fabric. Thanks to Marceline's unwavering support and Edric's experience, I felt ready for any turn of events. The silence inside me was no longer filled with despair, but with quiet determination. When one door slammed shut, another began to open, inviting me into the unknown future that awaited beyond the ruins. So, clinging to this fragile hope, I prepared to take a step forward, remembering everything I had lost and everything I could still gain. The shadows of betrayal still lingered, but the promise of renewal flickered faintly, like a beacon in the darkest night. This was not the end, but a painful yet necessary transition to something new, something stronger, clearer, and most importantly, something that belonged to me. I never thought that the path I chose for revenge would be so confusing, winding, and exhausting. When I learned of Serafina and Lysander Gray's betrayal, it hit me harder than I expected. Not only was my heart broken, but I felt completely devastated by the loss of what I considered family, by the fact that I had been betrayed in my own home. But I refused to let despair break me. Instead, I resolved to fight a new kind of battle, one that would force her to see the consequences of her actions in a way she couldn't ignore. Serafina's facade of elegance and self-control had fooled everyone, but now I knew the truth. I couldn't rely on simple confrontations or traditional legal battles. No, I would use the world we had built together, the business empire, the close circle of acquaintances, the delicate web of influence I had woven over the years. Marceline Voss, my loyal assistant and confidant, was my compass in this maze. Her calm insight helped me keep my cool when rage threatened to boil over. Edric Fenwick, my lawyer, offered traditional options, but I found them superficial compared to the strategy forming in my mind. Instead of seeking Serafina's immediate destruction, I intended to destroy everything she held dear. Her social status, her professional reputation, and even the trust Lysander placed in her. Victory in court wasn't enough. I wanted retribution to be inevitable. One night, immersed in the vast sea of data we had extracted from Serafina's hidden phone, Marceline discovered unexpected emails hinting at financial fraud. This was not just emotional betrayal, but the potential use of my company's resources to cover personal expenses. This discovery ignited a new fire in me. I could have pursued her through legal channels, but I envisioned a more subtle approach, exposing her through controlled leaks of information to key stakeholders, shaking her network from within. My first move was a carefully orchestrated game of poker, not in a casino, but behind closed doors among our business partners. I called Dorian Blythe, my longtime partner and friend, who was concerned about the situation but remained loyal. I revealed some of the evidence hinting at the financial shenanigans Serafina was trying to hide. Dorian's hesitation betrayed his shock, but also his concern for our organization. He knew that if this was left unaddressed, it would affect the future of the company. Meanwhile, Marceline and Celeste Arden, her closest friend and a master negotiator in high society, began gathering additional information. Celeste's network was invaluable. She had discreetly infiltrated Serafina's circle to unravel the web of lies she had woven to maintain her impeccable image. Together, we began to tear down the carefully constructed mask that Serafina wore so well. One of the most powerful moments came when I looked Serafina straight in the eye and, instead of accusing her, showed her the abyss her betrayal had carved out in my soul. I spoke calmly, but there was heaviness in my voice. She shrugged contemptuously, as if my pain was a mere inconvenience to her. This indifference only strengthened my resolve. I knew I had to destroy her world piece by piece, not with brute force, but with calculation and well-placed blows. At first, I decided not to reveal Lysander's secret publicly, but to use it to undermine their alliance. Rowena Hale, Lysander's wife, became an unexpected ally in this delicate war. Through secret channels organized by Celestia, Rowena learned the truth and, quietly enraged, distanced herself from him. This rift undermined Lysander's confidence and strength, and Serafina could not easily repair the damage. Financial maneuvers became my sharpest weapon. I liquidated personal assets and anonymously reinvested them in the company, buying out the shares of indifferent board members. This gave me hidden control over decisions, making it impossible for Serafina to use her usual tactics. The prenuptial agreement was my insurance, but the real power lay in my control over information and resources behind the scenes. Marcelina was my emotional anchor during this turbulent time. Her presence was a balm and a source of strong support. One evening, after an exhausting day of strategy meetings and delicate negotiations, she shared her concerns with me about how the story was changing me. Her honesty prompted a moment of vulnerability that I had not allowed myself before, the realization that I was fighting not only for revenge, but for a new identity, free from betrayal. As the weeks passed, the layers of this maze began to peel away. Serafina's colorless statements to the media were ignored, drowned out by rumors of scandal. Invitations to social events became fewer and fewer, and the carefully crafted image she had built began to crack under the pressure. Lysander's departure from public life was a silent admission of defeat. The network that had once supported them was falling apart, destroyed by patient and precise blows. Amidst all this, I found time to rebuild myself from the ashes. Investing in myself and the company gave me a glimmer of hope, a chance to reimagine my future. The vasectomy, which had seemed like the final blow, was no longer a symbol of loss but a challenge to be overcome. With Marceline's support and Edric's guidance, I signed up for counseling sessions that talked about change, about possibilities I had long since given up on. The unexpected complexity of revenge forced me to rethink everything about trust and power. It was no longer a simple game of victory or defeat, but a test of endurance and resilience. The pain remained, yes, but with it grew a cautious optimism. I realized that freeing myself from Serafina's deception meant not just ending our marriage, but reclaiming my life on my own terms. On a quiet evening, as Marceline and I discussed the latest events, a glimmer of hope for the future flashed between us. Professional restraint mingled with unfamiliar emotions, hinting that the next stage of my life would involve not only liberation, but also the slow restoration of love and partnership. The darkness receded, giving way to a reliable but still uncertain light. As our plans took shape and Serafina's defenses quietly crumbled, I realized that the battle was far from over, but the direction was clear. I was no longer a victim caught in a tangled web, I was the architect of my own destiny, navigating a maze of revenge with wit, self-control, and unexpected grace. The shadows of the past still lingered, but ahead lay a path to renewal, one I was ready to walk with those who stood beside me. Unmasking. I never thought that discovering the truth about Serafina would drag me into an endless web of lawsuits and social ruin. The initial shock of finding Lysander's careless messages on that secret phone was like a crack in the illusion I had built over the years. Now, what little trust remained was completely destroyed. Seraphine's double life was no longer a vague suspicion, but a stark reality I had to face. Marceline supported me when I needed it most. Her steady hands helped me navigate the emotional chaos, but her mind was already 10 steps ahead, planning the next moves. We agreed that relying solely on anger would get us nowhere. The goal was clear: protect my business and my reputation. Edric, our astute lawyer, was invaluable during this period, pointing out legal loopholes I had never considered and reminding me of the power hidden in the prenuptial agreement I had signed years ago. The battle that unfolded was not simply a fight for loyalty. It was a carefully calculated dance of defense and attack. Serafina and Lysander, unaware of their vulnerability, underestimated how tangled their deception had become. Rowena, Lysander's wife, unwittingly drawn into the story, became an unexpected player, using her silence as a weapon. When she first contacted us, her neutral stance made me wary. But Marcelina insisted that we keep her close as a silent ally. Outside the courtroom, the social consequences unfolded like a slow-moving epidemic. Serafina's carefully crafted social image crumbled as whispers and hidden truths reached the ears of strangers. It was difficult to watch a woman who had once enveloped our lives in a veil of visibility now being subjected to relentless public condemnation. I even noticed hesitation in Dorian Blythe, who was reluctant to fully support Serafina. The cracks in their professional partnership grew wider with each passing day. However, the real test was maintaining my composure during endless days filled with phone calls, negotiations, and mounting pressure. Marceline quietly reminded me, "This is our battle. You are not alone." Her voice strengthened me when doubts began to overwhelm my resolve. Celeste Arden, her close friend, sometimes joined us to offer moral support and practical advice, providing the kind of calm that only a true confidant can give. Our legal advisor, Edric, developed an approach that combined rigorous legal defense with strategic disclosure of information to the media. We chose a path that was neither reckless nor passive, but precise, disclosing certain facts to selected media outlets to preempt Serafina's attempts to control the narrative. This move shook her inner circle and forced her to reveal more details in court than she had anticipated, accelerating the collapse of her reputation. During a heated hearing, when Serafina's defense faltered, Lysander's involvement became even more apparent. It was no longer just a romance, but a betrayal that destroyed the foundations of trust, loyalty, and partnership. Lysander's confident smile gave way to nervousness when he was presented with evidence linking him to the children, hinting at further betrayals that I had no idea about. Rowan's role complicated the emotional situation. At an unexpected meeting organized by Marcelina, Rowan confessed that she suspected Lysander of infidelity but had no proof. She wanted a quiet divorce, but the scandal unwittingly drew her into the storm of events. Her fragile alliance with us became essential for obtaining inside information and exposing the manipulations of Serafina and Lysander. As the evidence mounted, I felt a strange mixture of strength and exhaustion. It seemed that each new discovery closed a painful chapter but opened a new one, with new challenges. Dorian's support was a strange comfort. Once he had been just a business partner, but now he had become someone who understood the full depth of my personal turmoil. Together, we began to implement plans to protect the company's future from the coming legal storm. Marceline's tenacity amazed me every day. Despite her deep emotional wounds, she never lost her focus. She interacted with people with an ease I envied, sometimes engaging in heated confrontations with fierce determination. Her balance between empathy and insight reminded me that victory depends not only on legal strength, but also on strength of spirit. The days dragged on, bringing new conflicts and revelations. Serafina continued to try to get through to me, manipulate me, or convince me to give up. But I learned to recognize the subtle threats disguised as apologies and promises. After one particularly cold conversation, I made it clear that I wanted no further contact except through my lawyers. That moment became a personal boundary for me, a refusal to give in to provocation or break down. Waiting for final decisions and a settlement was agonizing. The emotional damage was severe, but I found solace in small things, such as Marceline's company and Celeste's unwavering support. I dared to hope for the resolution to the conflict, not only for justice, but also for a new beginning, free from Serafina's shadow. The social consequences extended beyond my circle, affecting acquaintances, mutual friends, and industry contacts. Invitations to events suddenly stopped, and greetings were replaced by whispers. However, this expulsion from my old world was strangely liberating. It reminded me that in order to recover, it was necessary to get rid of everything connected with the past, no matter how painful it was. The court hearings were climactic moments, moments of harsh truth and confrontation. Seeing Serafina's calm facade crack before everyone's eyes strengthened my conviction that our struggle was justified. Lysander was less composed, caught between public exposure and personal shame. The shattered facade of their relationship exposed not only the lies, but also the deep cracks they had inflicted on so many lives. Amidst the chaos, a quiet transformation was taking place within me. The pain of betrayal was no longer just destruction, but fuel for recovery. Marceline's unwavering loyalty and our growing closeness became a gentle ray of hope that I had not allowed myself to see before. She was not just a trusted friend, but a person who filled the void left by loss. Under the guidance of Edric, who was an expert in legal matters, we prepared for the final steps. The lawsuits against Serafina's company for ethical violations and Lysander's complicity were moving forward, backed by evidence and driven not only by a desire for revenge, but also by a desire for accountability. This fight felt like something bigger than personal grievances. It was about restoring dignity and control over my life. Throughout this ordeal, I struggled with deep loneliness and feelings of betrayal, but I also gained new clarity. Every painful truth became a step on the path to freedom. Breaking up with Serafina was not just a decision, but an emotional liberation, a chance to breathe again and imagine a life built on honesty. As the dust began to settle, new alliances and a future appeared on the horizon. Marceline spoke of new beginnings and quiet moments away from the chaos. Celeste's warm presence reminded me that healing takes time, but it is possible. I began to understand that hope can emerge even from the ruins of broken trust. This chapter did not end definitively, but with possibility. The battles that had been fought in court and in my heart laid a foundation that was painful but strong. Through a broken heart and resilience, I learned what it meant to truly let go and start over. With allies on my side and a clearer mind, the road ahead seemed difficult, but not impossible. The story was far from over. Even as Serafina and Lysander faced the consequences, new challenges awaited them beyond the courtroom verdicts. The task of rebuilding their lives and finding meaning beyond betrayal. For the first time since the discovery, I allowed myself to believe that the future might not only bring loss. Marceline's unwavering wisdom and gentle support ignited a spark that I thought had been extinguished. As trust began to grow between us, I realized that this was the beginning, not the end. Together, we were ready to face whatever came our way, stronger than before. The struggle with Serafina's deception was a test that changed me. The result was a man who was no longer a prisoner of pain, but was ready to reclaim his joy and purpose in life. The process was long and full of shadows, but with each step, the hope for light became clearer. Now, as we prepared to emerge from the ordeal, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. The past had been ruthless, but from its ashes, a new chapter was about to be born. A chapter defined not by betrayal, but by strength, justice, and hope. Our work was not yet done, and the road ahead remained uncertain. But for the first time in many months, I felt confident that the darkest days were behind us. With Marceline and Edric by my side, I was ready to face whatever the future held. It was a moment to pause, gather my strength, and prepare for the next stage. Change was inevitable, but within that change lay opportunity. A chance to forge a new path, free from the burdens of the past and full of unexpected possibilities. After all, Serafina was a woman with a refined sense of tact, or at least I wanted to believe that until betrayal seeped into every cell of my being. This betrayal was not what I had imagined, not simply an act of emotional renunciation, but a tangled web of deception that had ensnared my children. The betrayal was cloaked in whispers and hidden messages on a second phone that Serafina insisted on using for work. With every trick I pulled, cloning her phone, tracking her late-night messages, the overwhelming reality became harder to deny. Lysander wasn't just a secret lover. He was the biological father of our children. This discovery stunned me, shattering the very foundation on which I had built my life. The revelation didn't come in the form of a loud exposé or dramatic confrontation, but quietly, in keeping with the grim semblance of normality that Serafina had maintained. The impossible facts were confirmed by the calm voice of a lab technician. Each DNA test result hit like a cold knife. None of the children were mine. A man who had considered his heritage secure felt his identity ripped from him and replaced with a void so deep it threatened to consume what remained of my shattered confidence. The house that had once been filled with family warmth became a house of silence and questions. In the depths of despair, I found an unexpected source of support. Marceline Voss, my loyal assistant and confidant, had noticed the cracks in my facade long before I admitted them to myself. One evening, after a long day shrouded in empty formalities, I confided in her, and the heavy burden was finally lifted from my shoulders. Marceline's unwavering support was more than just comfort. It was the spark of my first real hope since the storm had hit. Her quiet strength and loyalty rekindled the determination I feared I had lost, inspiring me not to seek revenge, but to reclaim my life. Revenge did not come in the form of sharp legal battles or theatrical performances in the courtroom. The plan Marceline and I devised was carefully thought out and creative at the same time. Understanding the important role Lysander played, I targeted his reputation and fragile personal life, acting quietly and precisely. Instead of drama, I used gradual exposure, quiet phone calls to Rowena Hale, Lysander's devoted wife, with irrefutable evidence of their affair. It was a surgical strike of truth that hit Lysander where it hurt the most, in the trust and respect of his closest relatives. This subtle destruction of his facade was poetic justice, complex and deeply satisfying, without turning bitter. While Lysander's destruction was taking place in the private sphere, I was securing my future. After consulting with my trusted lawyer, Edric Fenwick, I focused on carefully protecting my assets. Deciding to invest rather than squander, I bought out my longtime partner Dorian Blythe's shares using funds I had carefully set aside to protect my fortune behind layers of legal protection. Every step was calculated. I was no longer a man blinded by deception, but a strategist weaving a new destiny. The business remained mine, a silent testament to my ability to rise even when everything around me was crumbling. Emotional liberation came not with revenge, but with acceptance and the birth of new hope. With the support of Marceline and her close friend Celeste Arden, I began to explore the possibility of irreversible vasectomy. The doctor's words were cautious but encouraging, giving me hope for a future in which I could become a father on my own terms. It was a hope that slowly awakened in my soul, still clouded by loss. This newfound possibility gave me the courage to imagine a love that could overcome betrayal, to dream of a future unclouded by the scars of the past. This story is not just a story of individual redemption. It intersected with the lives of others who had been broken by similar betrayals. With the support of Marceline and Celeste, I met Rowena Hale. Her strength in the face of Lysander's betrayal mirrored my own journey. A silent truce developed between us, based on shared pain and an unspoken acknowledgement that these wounds could no longer be carried within us. Together, we began to formulate a plan of action that would lead to justice and personal healing. These alliances, quietly formed in the throes of suffering, became the foundation for our new lives. The last days before returning to the rhythm of work were marked by a quiet, resonant atmosphere. Marceline, once so close and intimate, had now re-established a professional distance that left me with a void I could hardly name. Was it gratitude, loss, or the ghost of unspoken feelings? Watching her disappear behind a wall of self-control, I felt the complex layers of what had bound us together remain in the air. Emotions complicated by circumstances but full of possibilities. The house we had lived in together for a short time was closing, but the story we had begun together promised a future that was no less profound. That's when I realized that the end of illusions is not erasure, but a painful transformation. From the shards of broken trust emerged a clearer vision of myself and a cautious optimism about what lay ahead. Serafina's betrayal threatened to destroy everything, But here, in the unpredictable aftermath, the dampness of loss gave birth to the seed of a new beginning. It was not just about past wounds, but about the strength found in accepting the uncertainty of life and stepping forward through the ruins into an unknown but hopeful tomorrow. My story was far from over. The fragile world I had found was a stepping stone to a more serious reckoning that awaited in the chapters to come. Justice had to be served, wounds had to be healed, and perhaps a new form of love would blossom. Marceline's presence, calm and silent, was the first ray of light breaking through the long shadows and whispering promises of renewal after the fall of illusions. With every breath, I moved closer to a future in which I would no longer be defined by what I had lost, but by what I had decided to build. After the storm of legal battles, I found myself between relief and unfamiliar silence. The weight of Serafina's betrayal still weighed heavily on me, but day by day, I began to recover the parts of Tadius Crane that had been lost. The truth, however cruel, dispelled the fog surrounding my future. Marceline Voss, always calm and unshakable, remained my anchor, and her close friend Celeste Arden brought unexpected warmth and light that gently eased my emotional pain. Without Serafina and Lysander, whose shadows lurked in every corner, the house felt different. Their departure left a void that I didn't dare fill, but I knew I had to start over. Marceline insisted that healing required action, not just time. Under her careful guidance, I began to rebuild my normal routine, the little rituals that tied me to the present. Morning walks with Celeste and Marceline helped me find hope to replace my doubts. Serafina's absence showed how deeply she had woven deception into our lives. The prenuptial agreement protected my property, and my trusted lawyer, Edric Fenwick, ruthlessly dismantled all of her claims. But the most painful wounds were invisible. The realization that the children I had raised and loved were not mine. This discovery struck me deeper than any legal victory, and for weeks, I struggled with loneliness and broken trust. Marceline became more than an assistant to me. She became my confidant and protector. During the day, she handled the chaos of our business, and at night, she listened to my fears and regrets without judgment. Celeste, with her gentle persistence, pushed me towards new perspectives. Their friendship was a lifeline for me, proving that even amid ruins, solidarity and kindness remained constant. My recovery was not linear or quick, but it was real. I began to see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, a faint promise of something better beyond the loss. Each morning felt less heavy, each laugh a balm for my wounded soul. Things with Dorian Blythe stabilized as I poured new energy into them, proving that resilience sometimes flourishes in the harshest of soils. Meanwhile, Lysander's shadow continued to haunt me in unexpected ways. News of his crumbling marriage to Rowena Hale quietly seeped through unnoticed channels. The threads of their dysfunctional relationship mirrored the chaos he had sown in my life. Marceline and I often talked about the tangled web that Serafina and Lysander had woven, acknowledging that broken trust could destroy not one family but two. Although my heart wavered, I realized that I had to move beyond revenge. The hardest actions had already been taken: lawsuits, public exposure, severing ties. Now the future demanded creation, not destruction. Marcelina encouraged me to think about a life in which hope did not waver under the weight of betrayal. One evening, during a quiet dinner at Marcelina's apartment, Celeste shared an idea that struck a chord within me. She told me about a joint property project outside the city that could be a new beginning. The prospect of creating something tangible, a refuge for a new start, resonated deeply with me. It wasn't just about business. It was about regaining my identity and my hopes. Adric, pragmatic as ever, urged patience but offered his unwavering support. Under his strategic guidance, I began to explore opportunities that could provide stability while leaving room for personal growth. The painful stages of conflict forced me to face harsh truths, but now there was a renewal on the horizon that extended beyond the shadows of the past. Against the backdrop of these changes, Marceline's presence took on a multi-layered meaning. As she transitioned from professional reserve to genuine concern, I felt a subtle awakening of unfamiliar but pleasant feelings. However, at the end of the workday, her reserved professionalism returned, reminding me that we both had scars that needed to be handled with care. Celeste smoothed things over when I was overcome with doubt, and her laughter inspired me to imagine a future defined not by loss but by the strength gained from it. The trio, formed by shared experiences and a quiet understanding, became the foundation on which I could rebuild my life. Together, they helped me understand that freedom from the past was not only possible, but necessary. My thoughts often returned to the children, to the echo of our broken family. Although the DNA test had shattered the illusions, Marceline and I discussed ways to channel that pain into creating something meaningful. I decided to live without regrets, honoring the lessons of the past and embracing the promise of a new beginning. During this difficult period of change in my life, the path forward remained uncertain but enticing. The pain of betrayal was strong, the shock deep, but with each passing day I saw more clearly the freedom that lay beyond the broken ties. Looking up at the horizon, I found the courage to believe in the future. Gradually, I realized that liberation was not only a practical path, but also an inner journey. With Marceline's unwavering support and Celeste's gentle encouragement, I began to imagine a future in which hope and healing coexisted. The past took a lot away, but it did not destroy my will for a new happiness. The delicate balance between grief and growth helped me survive sleepless nights of reflection and days of gradual recovery. Trust, once shattered, now hinted at renewal thanks to carefully nurtured relationships and a new beginning. I dared to imagine love unfolding in unexpected ways, guided by honesty, respect, and mutual care. As the months passed, the anger and despair gradually subsided. The brutal fight for justice left scars, but it also strengthened my resolve. I embraced this transformation with quiet determination, ready to forge a path illuminated by resilience and hard-won wisdom. The next steps hinted at possibilities in both my personal and professional life. Marceline and I drew up a strategic plan, and Celeste promised me her friendship and support. Together, we looked to a future unclouded by betrayal but illuminated by hope and a renewed sense of trust. In this new chapter, I discovered a profound truth. The end can be the beginning, and liberation, though painful, brings the sweet taste of freedom. The road ahead was still long, but now I looked at it with a lighter heart and a clearer vision than before. The future beckoned with a subtle promise, and I was ready to step into it. Second Life. The morning dawned with a calm I hadn't known in months. The storm Serafina had left behind, her betrayal, the destruction of the life I had considered my own, had finally subsided into a distant echo. I woke up in my modest apartment, which I had exchanged for an old house after my last bitter battle. The silence here was different, less oppressive, but unfamiliar, like the first page of a new chapter waiting to be written. Marceline was the only constant thing that softened the gloom and brought a glimmer of warmth to my days. Returning to work was like stepping into a world that had changed beneath my feet. The familiar office space with its sleek furniture and cold glass walls now had a different meaning. I no longer came here simply as Thaddeus Crane, CEO of a thriving company, but as a man who had risen from the ashes of deception. Marceline was there, calm and encouraging, the epitome of professionalism and trust. She greeted me with a small, sincere smile that, though cautious, carried an unspoken promise of support. Getting used to the new routine was difficult. Every interaction brought back memories of past failures and gnawing uncertainty about the future. I couldn't help noticing how my hands trembled slightly during meetings, how my gaze sometimes wandered to the door, half expecting to see Serafina returning with apologies or manipulations. But she wasn't there, banished not only by law but by the palpable rupture of our shared history. The prenuptial agreement, Edric's astute legal advice, and the carefully assembled evidence were my shield and sword. But the scars beneath them remained painfully visible. Marceline quietly took on more responsibilities, not only managing my schedule and keeping me informed about financial reports, but also gently nudging me toward a more balanced approach. Our conversations, once limited to work matters, began to touch on lighter topics. She shared anecdotes from her friendship with Celeste Arden, whose unwavering optimism was contagious. Celeste's letters, which Marceline sometimes read aloud during quiet breaks, painted pictures of resilience and hope that contrasted with the chaos I was experiencing. One afternoon, as I was reviewing the accounting books that Dorian Blythe had reassigned to me after the recent buyout, I found myself confiding in Marceline. "I never thought betrayal would cost me so much," I admitted in a quiet voice. "It cost me not only my trust but also the opportunity to be a father." Her eyes softened, and she gently placed her hand on mine. "It's a loss that cannot be described in words, But your story is not over yet. You still have a future to build, Thaddeus. Her conviction ignited a spark I thought had been extinguished. The lawsuits came and went. Seraphina's attempts to get the company were thwarted by the prenuptial agreement and the revelation of her connection to Lysander Gray, the very man she had trusted with the truth about her betrayal. The children we had once raised as our own, the laughter and shared moments, were far more complicated than I could have imagined. The DNA confirmation was a cruel nail in the coffin of our lives. Rowena Hale's silence and withdrawal from public life only highlighted how far the consequences had spread. However, despite all the pain, my spirit gradually recovered. I learned to navigate the changed world with courage, relying on allies rather than succumbing to isolation. Edric Fenwick remained a trusted advisor, his advice practical and unwavering. More importantly, he encouraged me to think about my well-being, not just the legal proceedings. "This isn't just about the trial, Thaddeus," he reminded me one evening, the sobriety in his voice contrasting sharply with his usual pragmatic tone. "This is about getting your life back." Marceline's presence also brought an unexpected new dimension to my life. She wasn't just my assistant, she became my confidant, and over time I felt an unspoken bond grow between us. Her loyalty wasn't out of duty, but came from a genuine concern that gradually broke down my defenses. Late at night in the office, when fatigue weighed heavily on my shoulders, her company was a balm, stable and soothing. I thought about my future. Could I allow myself to dream of something more than just survival? Could hope arise from the ruins of betrayal? Watching Marceline happily read Celeste's letters or discuss her plans for the weekend with a hesitant smile, I realized that this possibility was no longer a distant dream. Perhaps it was a horizon waiting to be reached. One evening, in a rare moment of candor, I admitted my fears aloud. "What if I'm not ready? What if the past still holds me too tightly?" Marceline replied gently. "Healing doesn't happen in a straight line. Every day is a step forward, even if some days feel like stumbling. You've come so far already." Her words weren't just comforting, they were a call to embrace each moment fully, no matter how imperfect. In the weeks that followed, the hustle and bustle at the company felt less like a reminder of loss and more like a stage for rebirth. I pushed forward with new initiatives, drawing on my partnership with Dorian and Marceline's wisdom. We developed a plan for sustainable growth, distancing ourselves from the shadow cast by Seraphina's actions. The atmosphere at work began to change. Tension gave way to cautious optimism. Private moments also became precious. Marceline invited me to join her and Celeste for a modest dinner where laughter flowed freely, and the weight of past wounds was lifted for a moment by our genuine closeness. That evening remains in my memory, a fragile but tangible glimpse of lightness. My thoughts often returned to what had been lost, but now more and more often to what could still be found. Legal victories had finally closed one chapter. Now I was drawn to unwritten pages. The discovery that my chance to become a biological father could still be restored with the help of a medical intervention, which Marceline helped to arrange, awakened a complex hope in me. Even amid the pain, life offered renewal. Days turned into months, and I felt a subtle transformation taking place within me. The sharp edges of my grief softened and turned into strength. Marceline's quiet steadfastness was both an anchor and a sail for me, holding me in place and pushing me forward. I was no longer alone on this uncertain journey, thanks to Celeste's friendship, which enveloped us both, and Edric's practical advice. A strong support network formed around me. I knew the road ahead would not be without obstacles, but for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to dream of something more than just survival. A fragile but growing belief grew within me that real hope and renewal could arise from the ashes of betrayal. The past would not be forgotten, but it would not define me. When I returned to my office one morning and sat down at my desk, where so many decisions awaited me, Marceline stood beside me, not just as an assistant, but as a partner in every sense of the word. I looked at her and felt a quiet but profound promise of a new beginning. My heart, still tender but determined, whispered yes to the future. So, with calm determination and the sun gently streaming through the blinds, I stepped forward, ready to write the next chapter, uncertain but full of hope, leaving the shadows behind and welcoming the dawn. The story was far from over, and I was ready to face whatever came next. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.